Well, a very, very happy Friday morning to everyone, and welcome to the John Kentera Show. And we're here each and every Monday and Friday at 10 o'clock. We got a lot to cover today. And don't worry, Padre fans, we're going to talk about Jerks and Profar signing that 3-year deal with the Atlanta Braves for $42 million. We're going to get into that. We'll get into your questions. I'm sure everybody's got comments. We got a lot to cover today on the program. And again, I would ask you, if you're tuning in, maybe for the very, very first time, if you'd subscribe to the channel, hit like. It doesn't cost a dime, and you'll be notified each and every time we have a show up. And there could be a time, if the Padres sign somebody, there could be a time where, we could be coming on a Saturday night at 10:30 at night. We're going to keep you up to date with everything going on with our San Diego Padres. I know everybody's got an opinion on Profar. I will tell you this. Profar got a sweetheart deal. And I'm not going to talk down Jerkson at all. In fact, we're going to get into that after our guest. And again, we got a lot to cover. We appreciate you being with us. And we're going to get right out to our guest, a very, very busy man. Seems like every day he's having to cover a press conference right now. Our good friend, Dylan Hernandez, great columnist for Los Angeles Times, joined us on this Friday morning. And Dylan, I know you've been, for what is considered the off season. I mean, we were trying to get you on earlier this week on Monday, but you're flying back from the NFL playoff game in Philadelphia. You've had a couple of press conferences up there. The LA sports world is really keeping you busy. You're not one of these columnists that's sitting around looking at your ceiling trying to figure out what you're going to write about.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting time here. The two football teams in town, obviously the Chargers and the Rams did kind of better than expected. And obviously the Dodgers right now are kind of having what I would consider to be like an unprecedented offseason just in terms of the volume of high, top shelf talent they brought in this winter.
Dylan, you're the perfect guy to talk to about Roki Sasaki because, we go back to when you went over to Japan before Shohei Ohtani ever came. That was a great column. I remember that column like it was yesterday. And you wrote a whole it was a feature story, and you spent time in Japan. You talked to his high school coach. You talked to anybody that would talk to you about Ohtani. And now you've seen Yoshinobu Yamamoto come over. And now probably the worst kept secret, Roki Sasaki decided to sign with the Dodgers. And, I know there are a lot of organizations that are pretty upset that, they felt they went through a lot to come up with nothing. It was kind of assumed right from the get-go he was going to go with the Dodgers. But even Major League Baseball said they ran an investigation and everything was on the up and up. But talk a little bit about Japanese baseball and how much the game means to them over there.
Yeah, it is by far the number one sport. I would say that, in the mid-'90s to, first few years of the 2000s, soccer was kind of creeping up, right? And I think what really kind of changed the tide over there, soccer was gaining a lot of momentum. They were sending a ton of players over to Europe, world-class players. And I really think what happened was the WBC, right? Japan won the first two WBC tournaments. And that really kind of made their baseball like a source of pride for the country. And, it is the number one sport over there. And there really isn't much else beyond that. Sure, people follow golf and, again, with soccer, the domestic league, it's kind of like MLS, right? Where, it's a nice domestic league, but all the best players are in Europe. So even, you're fans of, Kubo or whatever, he's playing in Spain right now. And so baseball is that thing, and I really think, in terms of, Ohtani and kind of his significance, it's that he really kind of represents, again, the way that culture views the best in what that culture sees in itself, right? I think you're raising a son in Japan, you want him to be like Ohtani, not just in terms of as an athlete, but as a person, right? Everybody who has a daughter was hoping, hey, maybe my daughter, this is the type of guy that you want your daughter to marry. He's right in a slightly different way. He's what Maradona was to Argentina or what Julio Cesar Chavez was to Mexico. He really kind of embodies the spirit of that country. And, Ohtani right now, he's ubiquitous, right? I think this past year, elementary school textbooks, in 5 different subjects, Ohtani's in there. That's how they teach division now. Shohei Ohtani, had this many at-bats, collected this many hits. What was his batting average? The language arts portion, it's basically his biography, right? So, and and kind of to put this Sasaki thing into context, Sasaki was the next guy, right? And we knew this from like a fairly early stage. I actually went to go see him when he was pitching in high school in 2019. The LA Times sent me and David Wharton, our Olympics writer, over to Tokyo. We thought the 2020 Olympics were actually going to happen in 2020. Obviously, the pandemic pushed it back. But we went a year ahead of time just to kind of do some stories on, okay, how far are they in their preparations for the games, and also to just kind of make contacts there. And, the first day we got to Japan, our first full day, we didn't have anything on the schedule. And a friend of mine who was covering kind of the high school baseball tournament calls me, and he says, "Hey, we actually got rained out today, right? Sasaki's game got rained out today. That's the day I landed." And he tells me, "Hey, if you take the bullet train up here, I'll go pick you up at the train station and you can come watch this." So I go, and in Japan, the way this works is it starts at the local level. It's a single elimination game. And they have prefectures over there instead of states. And so first you have to win your prefecture tournament. You get a single elimination tournament. You win there, you go to the national championship, right? The national championship tournament. That's Koshien. That is the single biggest sporting event in Japan. It's the Super Bowl and kind of March Madness all kind of thrown into one. And so this is the first round of the prefecture tournament. They're just playing some, little village team. I mean, he's from, kind of the Japanese equivalent of, like an Arkansas, right? Kind of a small state, kind of in the middle of nowhere. That's where Ohtani's from also. So I go up there, and what was really striking about this, and again, I really think this speaks to kind of what baseball means over there. So at this point, Sasaki had already thrown the ball 100 miles an hour. He is the biggest high school player. I mean, even bigger than Ohtani was, I think, at the same stage because, social media and everything, right? Just people just knew about him more. And after the game, they blow the team out. He only pitched 2 innings that day. They bring him into this underground batting cage. And they have to stand up, even though he's way taller than everybody there. They had him stand on top of this box. And he is surrounded by like 300 reporters, which is insane. I mean, really kind of think about this. This is a first round game. There's no chance he's going to lose. The thing was so big, actually, that afterwards I had a scrum, right? They all kind of, or obviously there was curiosity, like, why is an American here? And so I held like a semi, and they talked to me as if I was a scout. And I'm not, obviously. I had to kind of pretend, well, he looks like he's a great athlete. But again, this is, so Ohtani's kind of, right, if Ohtani's Michael Jordan, this kid is LeBron James, right? And that's the context I think that we have to kind of view this in, and is that this is the next big guy, right? And not only is it just from a baseball talent standpoint, it's also kind of what he represents, right? And again, I mentioned earlier, I think Ohtani, you do kind of view him as like, he's almost perfect, right? He was a good student even, his high school coach told me he was like a top 3 student in his class. And you can kind of tell by the way he talks, his diction, he's very thoughtful. Now this kid grew up on the coast of Iwate. So he and Ohtani are from the same prefecture. Ohtani's from inland, right? And now there's a mountain range that kind of separates that from the coastal area. And obviously that coastal area was hit by a big tsunami in 2011. Sasaki lost his father. He lost a pair of grandparents. And his family after that, his mother, Sasaki himself, older brother, younger brother, they relocated maybe about 20 miles north. And that's kind of where they rebuilt their lives. And, again, high school baseball is a huge deal over there. So they recruit, the top middle school kids get recruited nationally, right? So, you get offers to go to schools in, Osaka, in Tokyo, in Yokohama. And Ohtani kind of did a thing where he decided to kind of stay local, right? He stayed in Iwate. He was a big admirer of Yusei Kikuchi, who was actually the first big player to come out of there. He went to this private school there, and that school at the time, their policy was, we're only going to take kids from Iwate. We want to win a national championship with just kids from Iwate. And I think Ohtani was really kind of moved by watching Kikuchi's team kind of get to the final, so he decided to go to that school. Now, even that school, though, was a private school. It was maybe about 20 minutes from where Ohtani lived, right? So he still, lived in these dorms. He wasn't living at home. Sasaki took the extra step of not only staying in Iwate, he went to his local public school, right? And his reasoning was, this was where me and my family rebuilt our lives, And so I want to go to Koshien, right, the national championships with these group of guys. I grew up with these guys. These are the people that helped me through this ordeal, and I want to go to the national championships with them. So that gave Japan like a reason to pull for him, right? He became a symbol of the recovery of that region. You know, and if you remember, again, in the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, part of the theme was, right, these are the reconstruction games, right? And a lot of it had to do, right? They even put games in that general area in the Tohoku region that was affected, right? There were games like Sendai and stuff to kind of highlight the fact that, no, like we have gotten over this. We've recovered from this, you know? And so these are two major symbols. And I really think, you know, you can't really put, you know, I think Sasaki, in terms of kind of talent, in terms of stature, he's closer to Ohtani than he is Yamamoto, right? And even also as a physical talent, you know, I think I mentioned last time on the show, you know, probably, you know, you think of Japanese players, they've thrown a ton of innings, usually by the time they come here, right? It's, you know, they're good because they have great control and they really have superb craftsmanship. You know, in my view, there are three Japanese players, had they grown up here, would have had the physical attributes to be drafted #1 overall in the MLB draft. And that, you know, first guy would have been Darvish, then you would have had Ohtani, and Sasaki's the third one, right? These are not just kind of sneaky, crafty guys. These are big kids, right? They're as big as our guys here, you know. And I asked Brandon Gomes, like, hey, if all this goes well, who's his comp? He threw out Paul Skeens, right? And so, again, Paul Skeens, he went 1-1. That's the type of talent we're talking about. And so, you know, you're really talking about two, you know, Ohtani and Sasaki, not just two of the most popular baseball players, but probably two of the most famous people in all of Japan.
You know, Dylan, I want to go back to Ohtani because my first remembrance of Ohtani, my wife and I were sitting in our living room on a Sunday night, and we saw that interview with him on 60 Minutes. You recall that?
Yes.
That's before you ever went to Japan.
Yeah.
But that was the first time I started to pay attention. And then I found out, you know, read your great column, long lengthy. I don't even like to call it a column. It was like a half a book. You did incredible stuff, and I would urge people to go online. I'm sure they can download that and read it. It was a great article a number of years back before Ohtani, you know, actually got here. But they talked about Ohtani living kind of a Spartan existence. I mean, he lived like in a compound. He got about $1,000 a month, and if he was going out to dinner, he had to let the ball club know where he was going. They really kept him in a very much a protective environment. What it has been like for Roki Sasaki in his pro career over there in Japan, is he kind of fallen the same way, or has he had a little bit more freedom to go out and do his thing?
Yeah, I think they're so famous that it's hard for them to go out. They can't have like a normal life, right? And I think both guys are very kind of in different ways, just kind of focused in on their craft, you know. And I think, you know, one of the things about kind of Japanese culture that's different from here is kind of the influence of comic books over there, right? And, you know, I really do think, for example, like Ohtani only could have come from Japan, right? In terms of a two-way player, that existed in Japan. It was in a comic book, but it existed, right? So the idea was there. And actually, you know, kind of ironically, right? Or maybe not ironically, I mean, it could have very well been this being the case, but, you know, there was a comic book there called Major that was very popular. It was about a guy who pitched, he hit, and when he went to the major leagues, he played for the team in Anaheim. You know, the teams were all kind of fictionalized, but he played for the team in Anaheim. You know, and so I think just kind of having that in the air, right? And one of the most popular comic books over there, and it's actually, right, it's been dubbed into different languages. Julio Rios actually has the main character tattooed on his leg because it got translated into Spanish, was a soccer comic book, right? And, you know, Messi, I know, read it or you know, watched like the animated, the TV version of it. You know, Alessandro Del Piero supposedly started watching soccer because of that, you know, or playing soccer, I'm sorry, because of that. You know, that character is very kind of like one-dimensional in a way, right? He says stuff like, the ball is my friend, you know, and obviously it's a sports comic book, so there really isn't much wiggle room in terms of like a personal life or anything, right? The story obviously just kind of follows like his games and stuff. This guy never like lost, whatever. But again, that idea was kind of in the air, right? Like, you love your thing, you just kind of dedicate everything to it. And also, again, the media environment over there just makes it such that you can't really go out, right? And so, yeah, so in Ohtani's case, he lived in these dorms that the team basically provided for first and second year players. And usually they move out after that, right? Now, Ohtani just didn't ever move out. He, well, because, and his high school coach was telling me, like, hey, don't you want to, like, go get an apartment, like, have a girlfriend or something, right? And Ohtani's thing was like, well, why would I leave here? They feed me 3 times a day. If I go outside, the practice facilities are there. So if I ever want to practice, everything's right here. Like, why would I leave this place? And again, I think it's just kind of this like single-minded pursuit of excellence. And, I don't know too much about. So the interesting thing about Sasaki, the difference from Ohtani again, is that Ohtani was actually pretty available in Japan. I think now it's just gotten so overwhelming. And, I know a lot of the journalists that cover him on a daily basis complain, okay, we don't have much access to him. But like in Japan, he talks fairly regularly, right? Sasaki is different in that sense, right? The team has kind of gone out of their way to protect him. I mean, this even goes back to his high school, actually, right? After he hit 100 miles an hour, their campus was closed to all visitors. Journalists couldn't go there. Scouts couldn't even go there to watch them practice or anything. And they really kind of closed the campus off. And when he would turn pro, the team really kind of like limited the amount of access to him. And so we really didn't know much about him as a person, and so that part has been, a little bit different, right? And then, it's also a culture based on consideration. And so the media there, I think, is very kind of considerate of the fact that, hey, this is a kid who endured a lot of trauma as a child, and to be honest, like I kind of didn't get it until I saw him at the news conference the other day. Most superstars, they kind of walk with their chest up or out, right? I mean, they're, this kid, if you kind of notice, he's a little hunched over. He looks down a lot. Something's a little bit, and coach, like I usually don't have problems ripping people or going after them. This is going to be one where, if I do go after him, I'm probably going to have trouble sleeping that night a little bit, feeling bad. But yeah, so because of that, he really hasn't kind of existed. I do think he's been in some ways more protected even than Ohtani was.
Let's talk about expectations. He threw 111 innings last year. I know the Dodger fans expect this guy to come in and, win a Cy Young in the first year or two, but he's admitted that he wanted to go to an organization that could continue to develop him. He's very much an unfinished product. I mean, what do you think the Dodgers are looking to get out of him, and what should baseball fans expect to see out of him?
Yeah, I'm guessing it's going to be in the 130, 140 inning range, right? Obviously, they'll want him to, he missed some time last year with I believe it was a hamstring injury. So they're going to want to bump that number up, the innings up, obviously, to keep him healthy. What's going to help, I think, is that they have a 6-man rotation, right? So I don't think they're going to, overly burden him that much. Now, what was interesting, I asked Andrew Friedman, do you guys have any plans of maybe delaying the start of the season to make sure, that he's available in October? Friedman kind of made it sound like, hey, we're just going to have him hit the ground running from the start. It does sound, I asked Brandon Gomes, okay, just to make sure, like, he is starting the season in the major leagues. Gomes said, absolutely. My guess is that it's early on, it's going to be 4 or 5 innings, right? Now, I also think it's going to be 4 or 5, if it goes well. Now, we should kind of mention here that developmentally where he is, he himself said, when he was asked, what do you think the Dodgers kind of saw in you as your best traits? He said, fastball, forkball, right? And so the question a lot is over the slider. And I've heard it kind of both ways, right? I mean, there's a scout who covers Japan a lot, who I trust a lot, who from the time Ohtani was in Japan, this guy told me Ohtani can hit 50 home runs in the major leagues. And sure enough, the guy did it, right? So this guy has a history of being right. This guy tells me the slider's good. He's going to be good from day one. Now, I've also talked to some people who have also told me the slider's still kind of a work in progress, right? And in which case he's a 2-pitch pitcher. He might struggle a bit. But the one thing about Sasaki is that he's aesthetically like a very pleasing pitcher to watch, right? He has this very high leg kick, yet it's a very smooth, seamless delivery. When I see him pitch, I think of like Ken Griffey Jr. swinging the bat, or I think of like Ohtani swinging the bat, right? To me, Ohtani is more of a hitter. As good as he is pitching, to me, he looks more natural in the batter's box. And Sasaki kind of gives that kind of impression. In the game that I saw him again, he's playing against kids my size, right? And, he tripled, and I saw him run. so this kid's an athlete, right? You can just tell from watching the kid run. This kid's an athlete. Again, if he's born here, who knows if he's even playing baseball. And I do think that the athleticism is going to probably help him add pitches, modify pitches, right? The better athletes, the more repeatable a delivery. Obviously, it helps kind of make those adjustments. So I think that in terms of use, he's going to be pretty limited. What I don't have any doubt about is that because he's going to kind of be fun to watch, think about like a Tim Lincecum, right? It wasn't just the results. It was the fact that it just kind of looked nice. It was just beautiful, wasn't it, to watch Tim Lincecum pitch? Like some guys are just kind of like pleasing to watch. I think Sasaki is going to be that. And because of that, I think he's going to be very popular right away.
Okay, Dylan, one more question on Sasaki, and I want to jump around on the Dodgers a little bit. I don't know what more they can do. Maybe make a trade and get Nolan Arenado from the Cardinals. We'll talk about that in a minute. But as far as Sasaki, what kind of relationship did he have with Yamamoto and Ohtani before he made this decision? Because we know he had a really good relationship with Yu Darvish, and all these guys played on the WBC team. But how close was Sasaki to Yamamoto and Ohtani?
Yeah, my guess is right. So this didn't come up all too much in there, and I think Sasaki really went out of his way to kind of minimize the effect that the potential teammates had on the decision. I think from what I've heard, and again, I haven't talked to Sasaki about this, right? They kind of had him ask his questions on the stage and just quickly ushered him away. So kind of there was no room for any follow-ups.
Well, he got to go to the Laker game the night before the press conference and talk to Hachimura and to LeBron and the whole gang.
Yeah. So my understanding is that Yamamoto is actually the guy he's closest to, right? They share a management company in Japan. I believe that they were under the same apparel company before. There are a lot of kind of mutual ties there. I believe that they even worked out together one off season, and Sasaki returned to the Marines with kind of elements of Yamamoto's delivery. With Ohtani, now they're from the same prefecture, right? And in Japan, kind of there's like this seniority, hierarchy kind of that you have, right? And so, for example, let's just take, for example, right, Ohtani's first interpreter with the Angels. Or not interpreter, she did PR, but she went to the same Japanese school that I did, right? Maybe 10 years ahead. So she would be like my senior in that school. And it kind of shaped our relationship, if that makes sense, right? I always made sure I spoke to her formally and stuff. And so I do think as fellow, Iwatans, so to speak, right? And the fact that Ohtani's kind of the senior, I think it's kind of more that type of relationship. And obviously, like Darvish being older than all of them, probably kind of held more of that type of status, right? I do think, Darvish on the WBC team was kind of the unofficial captain, Now, again, this would kind of be, though, like, I'm guessing more of a relationship, say, that, like, I have with, like, Bill Plaschke of the LA Times, right? Like, obviously, like, look, we're very friendly. We talk.
He doesn't make you kiss his ring, though, right?
No, he doesn't. but right, there's certain places like I just won't go. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I still kind of view him as like somebody to kind of like respect, and right, or somebody I read growing up, and I do think that because of that, there's only you can. I mean, our relationship is special in its own way, right? But we're never going to be kind of like. Say somebody like, I don't know, Nick Picoro, for example, of the Arizona Republic, he and I are like the same age, right? And so those relationships are just kind of different. And so my guess is that he's closest to Yamamoto. They're closest in age and stuff. But with Darvish, I think it was probably more like, hey, he's kind of this guy up here. And I still do believe, what was very interesting about this, Sasaki at some point was asked, what stood out the most about the Dodgers? And his answer was the stability in the front office. So if you kind of, right, you read kind of what's going on with the Sidlers right now, you do wonder how much of an influence that might have had on his decision.
Yeah, not a good situation going on here in San Diego. This has been the offseason for the Dodgers. It has to be the greatest offseason in the history of baseball. I mean, from, bringing in guys on free agent contracts, keeping a guy like Tommy Edman, re-signing Teoscar Hernandez. I mean, getting Sasaki would have been a fantastic offseason, but I mean, then they go get Tanner Scott, and then they go get Kirby Yates. I mean, it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, and it's fascinating here. I think, right, there are a couple things that have happened. One is, right, I do think the Dodgers have always kind of prided themselves of, zigging when everybody's zagging, right? And the zagging thing right now is don't spend money. The baseball industry, to its credit, has done a phenomenal job of convincing their fans that it's stupid to spend money, which I just don't, I mean, how anybody can believe that, I think is beyond me, whatever, but like they've done a great job of convincing this. Now, here's the thing about this, right? I mean, obviously you kind of hear this is bad for baseball, all that stuff, and we could talk about that later, but the reason the system, what allowed actually Sasaki to go to the Dodgers are the cheap owners. I mean, keep in mind, right? The reason we have the system that they have right now is because the posting fees for guys like Matsuzaka, Darvish, right? They're pushing 50 million, 60 million, however much. And the owners were like, you know what? We don't want to have to pay that much for Japanese talent. So the first thing they did was they capped it at, right? They put a $20 million cap first. Now it's a percentage of the contract. But also what they did was they classified guys under the age of 25 as amateurs, right? Which is, I don't understand how Sasaki and like some 16-year-old Dominican kid can be put in the same pool, right? Because if Sasaki comes here, keep in mind, like as a free agent, so to speak, and can negotiate with anybody for as much as he wants, he's getting more than Yamamoto, right? I mean, Yamamoto got 325. We're looking at pushing 400 here. And then the Dodgers have to make a decision. I don't think if they're getting Sasaki, I don't know if they're getting Snell. Or if they get Snell, I'm not sure they're going to get Sasaki, right? So the baseball industry kind of is the only one to blame for this situation here. They created a situation where the Dodgers are going to have Roki Sasaki in their rotation pitching at the major league minimum, which is absurd. But yeah, this is just an incredible. I don't think we've seen anything like this, right? Because again, nobody is become in vogue to not spend. I mean, I was shocked in the World Series last year when you really when you think about it. Both the Dodgers and the Yankees, had to go to like a bullpen game basically because they didn't have like enough arms, to fill out a rotation. And you think about it, both teams could have had Blake Snell. Blake Snell was just right there. He was just sitting right there, right? And, the one thing about the Dodgers, right, I think there is this kind of impression that they've been spending like crazy all these years. And they have been spending a lot. That said, they have not kind of gone over the top at any point to do anything. Mookie Betts ended up a Dodger because the Red Sox didn't want to sign him to, the type of extension that he wanted. Freddie Freeman ended up a Dodger because the Braves would not give him an extra year on their contract. And that was kind of the Dodgers' stance, right? Was, look, we'll be in with everything. Stay in touch with us. Hey, and if your market collapses, we're right here. Now, Ohtani was obviously kind of a different issue, I think, because they saw the marketing potential. They went all in on Ohtani. But because Ohtani insisted that his contract be deferred, and not only because of the deferrals, but also because of just how much money they've been making, period. They just signed Ohtani had an endorsement deal with his tea company. The Dodgers just sent that press release yesterday. Now the Dodgers have a contract with them. Mookie Betts was just over in Japan, pitching tea, right? He did a press conference talking about tea. I don't even know if he drinks tea, but he was over there selling tea. And so now all of a sudden the Dodgers have all this money and they're kind of realizing, hey, you know what? No one else is spending. Let's go and get everybody, right? And I think this is going to be a fascinating year because, right, the thing has always been, doesn't matter the best team, right? You just need two great pitchers to kind of knock you out. I believe the Dodgers winning last year, they were only the sixth team in this century, right, in 25 years, to win the World Series after posting the best record in the major leagues. So usually that doesn't happen. No team is kind of invincible. This team looks pretty close to invincible to me, right? My colleague Bill Plaschke just wrote about that they might be invincible, that they're invincible. And so it will be interesting, right? Can these guys be beaten? Usually the antidote to a team like this was, you have a rotation with Randy Johnson and Kurt Schilling. Well, you know what? They don't make pitchers like that anymore, right? No team's got, no team has one guy that can go 9 innings, much less two. So, to me, this is going to be kind of fascinating experiment. Now, I also don't think this is a bad thing for baseball, right? We need to look at where the sport is as a whole. I know, like last year, okay, so Ohtani on the Dodgers. We got a Dodgers-Yankees World Series. The sport's in a great spot. But you kind of look at what's happened to the RSN industry, right? And that's affected the Padres, right? In a few years, the sports national broadcasting deals with Fox and ESPN are about to expire. The sports facing this a lot of uncertainty, I think, in the relatively near future. And the one thing that you do want, right, because baseball is a very regional sport, right? People are very popular in their markets. No one knows them nationally, right? Ohtani might be the only player that everybody across the country knows, maybe Aaron Judge, and that's about it. I do think what's great about this is you're going to have, in theory, the same team playing in the World Series every year. When I know some people don't like that, but all of a sudden now it's going to be Mookie Betts is going to become that famous. Freddie Freeman's going to become that famous, right? I mean, you can go back to the 90s and those Yankees teams, guys like Bernie Williams, Paul O'Neill, who maybe weren't, exactly Hall of Fame caliber players, but they still became nationally very known. The familiarity, I do think, is a good thing. We compare it. You could argue that this is a great thing about baseball, that we very recently had a Diamondbacks Rangers World Series. But look, let's be honest about it. No one watched it, right? You want Dodgers, Yankees. I do think that even though people are going to be upset that, okay, the Dodgers have all this thing, they're a great villain, right? They're a great villain. And their front office is so smug. You can't help but hate them. I think every other city, every other team's going to hate them. And I think that's great for baseball.
I got two more questions. And when we get you on next time, we're going to get into the deep rotation and the deep bullpen of the Dodgers. We're not going to do that today, but let's talk a little bit about Nolan Arenado. I mean, we know he turned down that deal originally to go to the Astros. There's been a lot of talk that he could go to the Red Sox, but I haven't heard him say the Dodgers have said no. Could there be something brewing behind the scenes right now to get Nolan Arenado? Because it seems like he's been wanting to be a Dodger since before he got traded from Colorado to the Cardinals.
Yeah, I think so. And he's handled this well in terms of, like, he hasn't publicly said anything. Now he's kind of passive aggressively, right? He posted, like, on his Instagram account some Kendrick Lamar song about the Dodger Blue or something, right? So there've been some subliminal messages there, but he hasn't done anything to kind of alienate the local fans. But I do think the Cardinals are kind of getting a little bit tired of this thing, right? Now, again, Arenado's side will tell you, like, hey, they promised to build a winner around him, and they haven't. So of course he's upset. The one thing is, though, is that he's in control of this process because he has a no trade clause in his contract, and he will not. Right? They had pretty much a deal to send him to Houston. He said no. Right? So, if the Cardinals want to get out of the Nolan Arenado business, they have one out, and that's the Dodgers. Now, I do have questions about how exactly this deal will work. Because this was a big deal for the Cardinals, right? When they got him. And this is going to look really bad if they don't get enough of a return here. I mean, I think, Dodger fans will probably look at this and say, well, dump Chris Taylor's salary, right? It could be kind of a salary swap situation, maybe send in, Muncy and a couple of prospects, whatever. Right. But St. Louis is a very passionate baseball town. Is that going to be enough to get it done? I'm not so sure. But again, just the fact that he's available, the fact that the Cardinals kind of have no leverage in this situation. This is the type of situation the Dodgers, again, to me, when I think about the Dodgers front office, I think of them as being opportunistic, right? They're not overly aggressive. They're opportunistic. And this is certainly an opportunity because the guy seems to only want to come here. And they're going to be able to extract some pretty favorable terms here. And I think it's just about giving up just enough so the Cardinals can kind of justify this move to their fans.
Let me ask you this, gut feeling. Will Nolan Arenado be in Tokyo on opening day against the Chicago Cubs playing third base for the Dodgers?
You know what? I'm going to say yes. Right now that we're talking about this, I'm going to say yes. Obviously he's still a great player defensively. Offensively, I'm guessing there's still some stuff in there, right? I mean, still, whatever it was, he still hit 270. I think there's something in there. Certainly, probably, in terms of kind of dependable kind of range of outcomes, right? Muncy in a way is a more sure thing, at least offensively. But Arenado's ceiling's probably higher. And again, we got to remember too that this is a defense that's going to have Mookie Betts at shortstop, and this player that's just coming over from Korea probably at second base. It's not a great defensive infield, and so maybe you get a guy. I mean, you guys have seen down in San Diego how much Manny Machado changes that. The Padres defense. You get a guy like that, right? Maybe not quite as good, but like close to it. put him at third base for the Dodgers, could make a big difference.
Last thing, we talked a lot about Japanese baseball, and I'm a big fan. I wish we could get those games over here in the U.S. I mean, it's like a football game. The fans are really into it and everything. And I'm a big Ichiro fan. When I was doing the Padre pre and post game show, I'd get to the ballpark early, and whenever Seattle was in town, the games at 7:10, Ichiro would be down the left field line stretching at 2:30, all by himself in his full uniform. I mean, the guy lived and breathed baseball, and I really think he thinks he could still play to this day at 51 years of age. I mean, fundamentally sound. He's the most fundamental baseball player you'd ever want to see. He goes into the Hall of Fame. Not sure who the one guy was that didn't vote for him or woman who didn't vote for him, but nonetheless, he's going in, first Japanese-born player going into the Baseball Hall of Fame. What does it mean to the Japanese fans over there in Japan and the United States that Ichiro's going into the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, I think Ichiro is probably like the first baseball god, say, of Japan, right? I mean, I think again the WBC, those tournaments, we kind of forget here, right? That we think kind of the World Series is the be all end all of everything. I think kids in Japan grow up wanting to win a WBC, frankly, before a World Series even, and the fact that like he won 2 of those, right, and then the second one delivered the winning hit. I think really just kind of elevated him to this status. And it's not just, who he's a lot like when he talks, actually, is Kobe Bryant, right? You kind of talk about maximizing kind of whatever talent he had as a player, but also when he talks about this, he's like very philosophical, to me, right? So right after he got elected, about an hour later, right, they have a teleconference with the writers and stuff. And, somebody just kind of asked him, like, how do you, okay, we kind of have a general idea of the way you train your body. How do you develop your mind? And he goes into this whole thing about, well, it's about choosing the most difficult route, and he talked about that if you take the easy way, right, it's just kind of the same thing, right? It's like if you do kind of easy training, your body's going to kind of atrophy. And I think toughness also kind of atrophies like that. And it's very important to kind of take do the most difficult thing possible. And all of a sudden, right, this is kind of like a thing that's like applicable like in every walk of life, right? And like kind of, and I think Kobe kind of had a little bit of that too, right? Whenever he kind of talked about basketball, okay, he's talking about basketball, but it kind of applies, right? He kind of found, right, he got so deep into it. He really kind of, right, cut out all the kind of BS and got to the root of everything. And it kind of becomes this thing that becomes applicable in all facets of life. And I think, for that reason, again, Ichiro's obviously the way he's admired, not just for, just kind of like his baseball stuff, but also just, again, who he is as a person, his mind. One interesting thing too, remember, I don't know if you remember, but when Ohtani first came over here, he had a disastrous his first spring training. His
like ERA was like, did.
Yeah, his ERA was like 7. I think he hit under 200. People were saying, I think my buddy Jeff Paston wrote a story quoting a bunch of scouts saying this guy can't play in the major leagues. But at the end of camp, he went to go visit Ichiro, and they worked some things out in his swing. And that, after that, he took right off. So I don't know. I kind of figured Ohtani would have figured it out on his own at some point anyway. But yeah, again, I think that shows, though, what Ichiro means. The fact that, like, when Ohtani felt like, hey, maybe this isn't working out, that was the guy you went to go visit.
It's kind of interesting. I'll leave it on this. There was a story because Ichiro had a miserable first spring with Seattle. I mean, he was hitting everything to left field, getting jammed, bat getting knocked out of his hands. And Lou Piniella apparently said to one of the coaches, man, I don't know if this guy can play in the big leagues. And Ichiro got wind of that. And the next time up, he rifled one over the right field wall. And he came over to Piniella and goes, okay, do you see that? Now can I just go about getting ready for the season?
Yeah, and that's a very Japanese thing too, right? I think Ohtani, Dan Evans, the former Dodgers GM, I think he was scouting for Toronto at the time when Ohtani came over. And I remember I asked him that spring, like, hey, should we be worried about this at all? And he's like, this is every spring, right? And sure enough, one of the Japanese reporters happened to have all his spring training stats, and he was bad every spring, right? And again, I think, I think that like Ichiro kind of helped set that type of culture, right? And I think similar to the way you see Kobe Bryant and the effect that he had on, like this current generation of NBA players, especially the older ones who got to spend some time alongside him, the LeBrons, the Kevin Durants, to see how Kobe's affected them. I think Ichiro had the same effect on an entire generation of Japanese players.
Dylan Hernandez, I've kept you far too long on this Friday morning. Hope the family's doing well. Always a lot of fun. And next time we get on, we're going to talk about that Dodger rotation and bullpen because people forget Ohtani doesn't count as a pitcher. Dodgers will have 13 pitchers plus Ohtani, so they've got another advantage. We'll talk about that next time.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on, Coach. Seriously, it's always a pleasure to be on here. And yeah, I'm actually sorry I talked so much. I didn't realize so much time had gone by.
We have a good time, and thanks so much. Really, and appreciate your great insights. And you're very close to the situation up there. Very much appreciated, Dylan.
No, thank you, Coach.
There you go. One of the great guys, and always enjoy having him. I'll tell you, I don't know if there's another podcast in America that would give you the insight that Dylan Hernandez will give you on Ohtani or on Sasaki, because he's been over there. He even mentioned he saw Sasaki pitch in high school. I mean, that's some amazing stuff. Ichiro is just, I mean, I can't begin to tell you how much I loved Ichiro when he played. I mean, he was just something special. Okay, Padre fans, you've heard a lot about the Dodgers. What are we going to do about our ball club? What are we going to do about our ball club? I mean, we're looking right now at spring training opening up for pitchers and catchers on February 12th. We're still in the same situation now that we were in at the end of the playoffs. We need a left fielder. We need a true starting catcher. We've got some bodies, whether it be, Luis Camposano, Martin Maldonado, Brent Sullivan as a backup maybe. But we've got to sign some players, and we need some arms. I really think A.J. Preller, I think his hands are tied until he can make a deal. I really think that's the case, but we're going to get in, and I want to get to your questions and comments, because I know I was out last night doing the UC San Diego basketball game against Santa Barbara. It was on Spectrum Sports, the Lakers station. And hopefully maybe you saw it. If not, I know they're running it probably a couple of times today. But nonetheless, I get word. I knew it was close, but the Jurickson Profar was going to become an Atlanta Brave. He gets a 3-year, $42 million deal. Okay, I think a lot of people are going to blame the Padres because they didn't sign Profar. Remember, Profar played last year for $1 million. And he had a career year. I mean, I'm going to get to his numbers here in a minute. But I've been saying all offseason, you can't bring him back. You can't give him 12 or 12 and a half or 13 million. You just can't do it. He's going to be 32 years of age on February 20th. He's coming off a career year, 280 he hit with 24 bombs, 85 RBIs. The best overall year he's ever had. He also was the starting left fielder in the All-Star game for the National League. Jurickson played great. He had 305 last year prior to the All-Star break. And then things kind of declined the second half, and he's battling that knee. And I don't know if that knee is completely 100%. He's been working with Fernando and his dad once again during the offseason. He got a great deal. I mean, 3 years, $42 million. He's going to get $14 million per year. Padres can't pay that to Jurickson Profar. They really can't. And I don't think anybody in Padreville, us Padre fans, we couldn't expect the Padres to pay Jurickson Profar $14 million. That you just can't do that. He's a journeyman ball player. I know we need a left fielder. I understand that. I don't know who's going to play left field. But I'm sure A.J. Preller's got a good idea. I got to believe in A.J. on this. I really do. I mean, look at Profar's numbers. I mean, he's been in the big leagues for 11 years, folks. Last year, I mentioned 280, a 380 on base percentage, a 459 slug. Okay, now let me give you his lifetime numbers. And he's been at the plate a lot. He's been at the plate just over 4,000 times in total plate appearances. But his career on base percentage at 331. Last year, 380. His career batting average, 245. Last year, he hit 280. And his slugging percentage last year was 459, career 395. He surpassed all of it. My bet is he can't do that again. And that's a great year. And I'm not saying that, it was a fluke. I mean, Jurickson Profar plays the game, I think, the right way. And I'm not going to sit here and dog him because anytime in a Padre uniform, he played his tail off for us. He played with a heart. He played with passion. He was a great teammate. He developed into being a very, very nice left fielder. There's nothing bad to say. I got nothing bad to say about Profar, but I can't pay him if I'm the Padres $12 million, let alone $14 million in a long-term contract. I just can't do it. Now, what's that going to do to this ball club? I mean, he was one of the real catalysts. You've got Luis Ariz if he's still here. I'm not sure Ariz will be here. They can dump $14 million. I'm not saying that the Padres are going into a fire sale. I have no idea what they're going in. Nobody's saying nothing. I'm sure the general manager can't talk. We know about the lawsuit from Shield Seidler, suing a couple of Peter's brothers. They're not saying anything other than that they don't feel they've done anything wrong. But we haven't signed anybody. We signed Tyler Wade, a utility guy. He gets $900,000. And then we signed a few guys, one of them being Martin Maldonado, a minor league contract and invite to spring training. We haven't signed anybody. Really, I mean, aside from Tyler Wade, Padres have spent zero money in free agents. Now, Profar, there was talk he was going to the Yankees. We even heard he might go to the Dodgers, which I never believed that. But, hey, I wish Jurickson the best. He's going to play left field. You got Michael Harris, who's a hell of a player in center field, and Ronald Acuna Jr. be coming back from, a serious knee injury. And those guys can play, man. Michael Harris could flat out go get the ball in center field. Acuna is as good as anybody in baseball when he's healthy. But Profar gets this great deal. But what'll be interesting, not only are you having to replace Profar in the outfield and, up in the batting order, he's also a clubhouse guy. Everybody likes Jurickson. I mean, everybody likes him. Even the kids like him that are sitting down at field level and get interactions. He's got that big smile. There's nothing not to like about him. It just, I don't know if he can. I would bet that he's not going to hit 280 and hit 24 dingers and drive in 85 runs. Maybe hit 270, which isn't bad, but I'm not going to pay $14 million for a guy that hits 14 home runs and drives in, 55 runs and hits 270. I'm not going to do that. Now, you could go with Tirso Ornelas. Tirso Ornelas, let me tell you a little bit about him. Most of you have no idea who this guy is. 24 years of age. Left-hand hitter, right-hand thrower. Had a good year in AAA last year, but that's AAA. Hitter-friendly league. 297, 23 long balls, 89 RBIs. Brandon Lockridge, a guy that, is on the roster, on the 40-man roster, but hey, let's face it. He's not going to be an everyday major league player. You're going to come in, play defense, be really your fifth outfielder, not even your fourth outfielder. On most ball clubs, they'd be your fifth outfielder, and guy maybe going up and down between the big leagues and AAA. But that's what the Padres have right now in their 40-man roster. Tirso Ornelas, maybe it's his time. Maybe he comes in, plays for the league minimum, and does a good job. We'll have to wait and see. Now, the Padres payroll. The opening day payroll right now is projected at 197. And I know I think they'd like to get it down. I think it's going to be over 200 million. Remember, they got to go to arbitration right now unless they settle. They got to go to arbitration with Michael King. I still think one of the boys is going. Whether it's Ariz or whether it's Dylan Cease, one of those guys is going bye-bye, I think. I would be shocked opening day if Dylan Cease, Michael King, and Luis Ariz, I would be shocked if all three of those guys were on the roster. And maybe just in a trade, maybe you can get a left fielder. I'm not asking for a left fielder who can hit 35 bombs. I would love that, but you're going to have to pay the price. Padres are going backwards in payroll. We got to understand that. And they got to build their farm system up again. But Jurickson Profar, hey, I salute you, man. You came in here and really got your career on track. I mean, you take a look. He was the number one prospect in baseball for a couple of years with Texas in the minor leagues. Then he had some significant injuries that really held him back. Got to the big leagues with Texas, went to Oakland, came to the Padres, Padres gave him a nice deal. He opted out, ended up signing a year ago in 2023 with Colorado. Statistically, his numbers, and remember, everybody talks about Colorado, how your numbers are always inflated. Statistically, and by WAR and whatever analytics you wanted to look at, when Jurickson Profar got released by the Colorado Rockies, he was statistically the worst player in the National League. And I said on my radio show, as soon as he got DFA'd, I go, Jurickson Profar will end up signing with the Padres. Well, bingo. As soon as he cleared waivers, they signed him to a minor league contract. He played, three games down there in AAA, brought him to the big leagues, finished 2023, playing really well, and they bring him back in 2024, and he has a career year. Let's see what he can do with the Atlanta Braves. And like I've said before, folks, we can't worry about the Dodgers are going to probably run away with the division. They may win the division by 15, 20 games. But I think the Dodgers, more than anything else, they're going to try to keep their guys healthy. They've got a 6-man rotation. Those 6 guys may go 5 innings, and they got a deep bullpen. And they're not going to be able to keep everybody. But Dodgers are going to win the division. We're playing for second place. And right now, the way things are going, I think we're in third. I still think we're better than the Giants and better than Colorado, but that Diamondbacks ball club, I think, is going to be tough. They're going to be tough, and they seem to be kind of the young team up and coming, and it could be the last year they have Zach Gallen. They signed Corbin Burns. They got Merrill Kelly, Eduardo Rodriguez, who wasn't very good. Jordan Montgomery's still on the roster. He was awful last year. He's had a whole offseason to get himself in shape. They got a good ball club over there, and they seem to be hungry. And it'll be interesting. When you lose a guy like Profar, you're not making moves. The veteran players start looking at one another going, hey, man, this isn't what we signed up for. Guys like Machado and Bogarts, they may be looking at one another, God, we have no chance to win the World Series. You never know what players are thinking. But right now, Padres have done nothing. And again, I don't necessarily think that we can point the finger at AJ Preller. I see on X all the time people, what's AJ going to do? What's AJ going to do? I don't know if AJ can do anything right now until he moves somebody. And you can't move anybody unless you find a dance partner. And right now, he hadn't found a dance partner. So this is more on ownership right now. And you heard Dylan Hernandez talk about Sasaki, saying that, Sasaki, one of the first things he said was, the front office, the stability of the front office and the ownership played a huge part in it. The Dodgers are a worldwide franchise. They're always going to have the upper hand on everybody except maybe the Yankees. They're always going to have the upper hand. And right now, they're the cat's meow. I mean, I heard a story, and I haven't been able to verify it, but that 90% of the Major League jersey sales in Japan are Dodger jerseys. And we know all the games are on TV there. So they've got the upper hand. We got to develop players. And then when we get close, we got to go out and spend some money in free agency. We got to develop our own. We got to get some arms. We got to develop some pitching. But anyways, I could go on and on and on. But Jurickson Profar, great job in a Padre uniform. You earned that spot last year in the All-Star game. You really did. You earned it. I wish you the best of luck. I'm glad you got a great deal. For me, it's an overpay, but more power to you because I think you're a good guy and you gave San Diego all they could, all you could. And we very much appreciate that, being a lifelong Padres fan. Okay, I wanted to mention the Hall of Fame a little bit. We talked with Dylan Hernandez about Ichiro, big Ichiro fan. Ichiro got 393 of 394 votes. How would you like to be the one guy that didn't vote for Ichiro? Why? Why would you not vote for Ichiro? And Ichiro was great. The other day he came out and goes, I'd like to find out who that writer was. I'd like to invite him over to my house and we could have a drink together and we could sit and have a nice chat. How can you not vote for Ichiro? Everything this guy did, a .311 career hitter, won 2 batting titles, 10 All-Star appearances, 10 Gold Gloves. The guy didn't come to the United States till he was 27 years of age. He got over 3,000 hits. Guy was fundamentally, there's nobody better I mean, watching him get behind a fly ball and get that momentum coming in, whether he was throwing to third base or home base, it was amazing. I mean, I could go on about Ichiro until the cows come home. I'm a big fan. Really respected the hell of the way he respected the game. I mean, he was amazing. Billy Wagner gets in 82.5%. I had no problem with that. CC Sabathia got in 86.8%. 251, 161 record, 3.74 ERA. I guess if you dumb it down a little bit, I mean, you got Tommy John. He's not in 288. Who made a bigger impact on the game, Tommy John or CC Sabathia? I'd have to say Tommy John. The elbow surgery is named after him. But CC Sabathia, I think people like him. They got him in. One guy that I'm going to still fight for, and I don't know him at all. I watched him play a ton. Andrew Jones. He got 66.2%, 261 votes. I'd like to see him get in. Carlos Beltran, and I don't hold anything against Beltran. I know a lot of people say, the sign stealing scandal, fine, great. But I wasn't a big Beltran fan when he was a player. He got 70.3%. He'll probably get in next year. But Andrew Jones, 10-time Gold Glove guy. The biggest thing with Andrew Jones, maybe he played too long. He had some great years with Atlanta. And then he started bouncing around with the Dodgers and went to the Yankees there for a while. He may have played too long. And I think a lot of people forget just how good he was. Over 400 career home runs. For me, Andrew Jones, he's really one of the top 3 or 4 center fielders I've ever seen. Willie Mays, Ken Griffey Jr., Andrew Jones, Paul Blair, who wasn't a Hall of Fame talent, but a Hall of Fame center fielder with Baltimore back in the 60s and 70s. He's a hell of a player. So I wanted to mention that. And they'll go in this summer along with my buddy Dave Parker and Dick Allen, who passed away a few years back. Okay, college basketball, and I'll make this quick. San Diego State, thank goodness Wayne McKinney can fly down a basketball court. They went on a buzzer beater in overtime the other night against Air Force. Tomorrow night, they're going to be up in Nevada, taking on the Nevada Wolfpack. They're struggling right now, but the Aztecs, they almost let one get away. You got to give Air Force a lot of credit. I thought they played very, very well the other night. Air Force is a tough one. They're not very good. They haven't won a conference game. They won like 3 games all year. But their style of play can be very frustrating. But the Aztecs get the win. They get back to town, and now they're heading up to Reno to take on Steve Alford's Nevada Wolfpack on Saturday night. I mentioned the game I called last night, UC Santa Barbara against UCSD. The Tritons, they rolled again. They've got 16 wins right now. They're 16-4, 6-3 in conference play, doing a great job. They host CSUN on Saturday night at Lion Tree Arena at 7 o'clock. They had almost 3,500 fans out there last night at Lion Tree Arena. The game was on in Southern California. We were on Spectrum Sports, the Lakers station, along with ESPN Plus. I'll be broadcasting again tomorrow night on ESPN Plus. And then you've got USD, Steve Lavin, 4-17. 4-17 overall. They get beat by 10 on the road last night by Portland. Now they've got to get ready to take on the USF Dons. This is the 3rd year for Steve Lavin, and he's had 3 different teams. He can't keep guys because of the transfer portal. And one of his guys from a year ago, in fact, the guy that played the first 2 years he was there, played last night and played very well for Santa Barbara, Deuce Turner. He played great coming off the bench for the Gauchos, but they're having a problem keeping players out there at USD. And like I mentioned, Steve Lavin, 4-17. Program not going anywhere near where it needs to go. Okay, we got some football this weekend, folks. We got the NFC and AFC Championship games. Sunday, 12 o'clock at Lincoln Financial. You got 6th seed Washington, the Commanders, who finished 2nd place in the NFC East, going against the Philadelphia Eagles, NFC East champs. This is going to be a heck of a game. Both teams, they split during the regular season. Jalen Hurts, less than 100% right now. I think that'll be a great game. I'm going to go with Philadelphia. I'm going to give them advantages because they're at home. And in the AFC Championship game at 3:30 on Sunday, I'm going to go with Kansas City. Buffalo, I think, was very fortunate to get there. I think Baltimore, they just turned it over too many times, and Mark Andrews had a rough ball game. Not only did he drop one pass, he had the other pass over the middle for a big gain. He fumbled, and then, of course, we know he dropped the 2-point conversion that would have tied the game, and that game probably would have gone to overtime. But I got to go with Kansas City marching on to yet another Super Bowl. And if they get to the Super Bowl, they'll probably be favored in that Super Bowl. Okay, national championship. Congratulations to Ryan Day. The guy took a lot of crap. But the best thing that happened to Ohio State was getting beat by Michigan. And I know for you Ohio State fans, you cringe at that. But it really was. They got them refocused, and then they marched through. It really marched through the college football playoffs. The other night, give Notre Dame Marcus Freeman, great coach, great guy. Had his team well prepared. They got jumped on by Ohio State, but an easy at halftime to roll over and just play out the final 30 minutes. They made a ball game of it. But Ryan Day, think about this. In his time at Ohio State, he has lost 5 conference games, 4 of them to Michigan. He's like 46-5 in conference play. 4 losses to Michigan and 1 to Oregon, who just came in to the Big Ten Conference this year. His record with the national championship win the other night is 70-10. And they were talking about after the Michigan game to fire this guy. Guy's record is unbelievable, 70-10. So he can have a nice off season. And congratulations, Ohio State. A game very, very well played. All right. If we got any questions, we'll take them right now. If not, I'm going to let you get on with your Friday. All right, Matthew. Oh, Matthew, thank you very much. I'll be able to buy a Roberto's burrito a little bit later today. I appreciate that very much. That's very kind of you. And there's our president raising his right hand right next to the American flag. I'm sorry, but the Padres returned to the franchise I grew up watching. Peavy and Adrian Gonzalez leaving. And by the way, congratulations to Jake and Adrian, both inducted a week or so ago in the Breitbart Hall of Fame. 2 great guys, big fans of both of those guys. But you know what, Matthew? I think it's going to be really, really interesting to see what goes on in the coming weeks, months, and years. I talked to someone last night, actually, and who's pretty close to the Padres. And I didn't like pump him for information, but I told him I think this ball club gets sold. I just don't think they have the deep pockets. Unless they go out and get a cash call, I don't think they have the deep pockets. I think you're going to see some changes, and those changes may come in the next couple of years. We'll have to wait and see. Norm Lee, I'm assuming Preller has been quiet because the ownership battle has tied his hands. No one knows who has the authority to approve trades and signings until the courts decide. Cage Lion. Well, Norm, I will tell you this. In my opinion, other than A.J. Preller and his staff, on the business side and ownership side, there's nobody that knows baseball in there. And the only way they could sign off on a trade would be on the money factor. As far as talent level, they don't know. I mean, A.J. Preller's got a good staff. Josh Stein, one of the assistant GMs, and they've got other guys that have that title down there. Freddie Ullman Jr. left the organization right after the season started a year ago. Had been a long tenured employee, good baseball man, Freddie Ullman Jr. But, the only way ownership would get involved, I think now, would be, yes, we have the money, or no, we can't do this deal, because they don't have anybody in there with any scouting background. It did be, swinging in the dark, the way I see it. But I do think, and I really believe, AJ does have his hands tied. And I think the only way he's going to get his hands untied is if he can find a dance partner for Arise or for Dylan Cease. I think Cease probably brings a lot more than if you traded Michael King. I think Dylan Cease, he's done it for a longer period of time in a starting situation. Who knows if this arbitration case goes awry and Michael King wins and get what he wants, who knows? I mean, they're arguing right now over $1.5 million. 1.5. Okay? And to maybe stay in a relationship with a guy you'd like to re-sign. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on, but I think Dylan Cease would get you more in a trade than Michael King or Luis Arise. Okay, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Really appreciate it. We're getting more and more views each and every time. I want to thank Dylan Hernandez, my man Jonathan, spinning the controls, always doing a great job. Again, we'll be back in on Monday, and we'll have some good nuggets for you on Monday. But man, Dylan Hernandez gave some great content today about Sasaki and Ohtani, Yamamoto, and just Japanese baseball in general. And hey, once again, congratulations to Jerks and Porfar. Gets a sweetheart deal. Padres couldn't sign him at that amount. Even if the Padres were wanting to, break the bank, you can't give Porfar a 3-year, $42 million deal. Least of all, I couldn't. But hey, good luck to Jerks. And again, we'll talk to you on Monday. Enjoy the NFL games on Sunday. We'll break those down. We'll keep you up to date on Padre baseball. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.